Managing the growth of your construction business is tough. As the number of projects grow, you feel that you're not in control. It's time to equip your construction company with the right strategy and tools for unstoppable growth. Driving growth by aligning strategy and operations is a free learning series that will teach you how to grow your business confidently. Brought to you by Connected Construction, an online resource for digital construction management, and Steer, a construction management software.
I'm very happy and excited to be here. It's been our passion actually to not just study the issues of business, but to really work with real businesses and listen to them and understand them deeply and collaborate with them to find new solutions so that they can grow. So I'm very excited for the opportunity to be with you this afternoon. Okay, so today this is a learning series sponsored by Connected Construction, and this is really intended for those entrepreneurs in the construction business that want to grow faster. So we're here today with you. We're here on the live stream, and I'm sure this is going to be published as well on the podcast. But for those on the live stream, we'd be very happy to take some of your questions later. Arup and I are here to maybe share some thoughts. So let's begin. Why are we here? Okay. And, when you look across many economies, let's start with the poorest. When you look across many economies around the world, as countries develop, at some point, they transition from different parts of the economy. Many of them start in agriculture. Many of them start in trading. Okay. But most definitely, especially as the population grows, real estate becomes such a critical part of the economy. And then also, of course, to support the growth, infrastructure becomes critical. And, when you look at the Philippines in particular, real estate has had a really tremendous growth probably over the last 2 to 3 decades. And, it's really been driving the construction industry across the country. So if you've been traveling recently, you'll notice that, wow, the quantity and the quality of real estate development throughout the country is really expanding. And, valuations are very good. So I'm sure the developers are also very eager to continue starting new real estate projects. There's also a lot of new developers coming on. But the other side of this, really, the other side of the construction industry, of course, is always infrastructure. And we know for sure that given the growth of our population and given the changing context of urbanization, where the urban growth is going to happen moving forward, we know that more infrastructure is going to be needed. And it almost seems like an endless list of requirements. And I would say that in as much as the government or in as much as the country wants more infrastructure or wants more and better quality real estate projects, I think one of the major constraints actually is our ability to make real all the visions that people have about what kind of infra and what kind of construction we have. So I would say the construction industry and all the related sub-industries in the whole construction supply chain is really challenged, to rise to this call to action, to build, and create more infrastructure and real estate projects. And the reality is, my experience, having been exposed to the industry for almost 3 decades, is that this industry actually is one of the slower ones to innovate. For many reasons, the standards, of course, have begun to change. But for a long time, when you talk about design standards that are acceptable in the Philippines, many of these standards took some time to change. And even if you change the standard, there's a lot of forces that are making it difficult, actually. People are not used to new ways of doing things. There's many pressures. One of the big pressures actually in our inability maybe to address some of the new standards is that it's difficult to do and it's expensive. And, contractors and developers and designers are always trying to figure out this trade off between design, like what we want and what our customers want, versus what we can build. And, the capability in managing projects has always been a challenge. So, despite the fact that most people expect that we're going to have a lot more construction projects, not just this year, but in the succeeding years, and that, the value and the size of these projects are going to be increasing. That's the exciting part. That's the reason why we need this kind of learning exercise, is because it's not so much the demand that's the issue, but it's really more about the ability of the supply chain and the construction companies to execute and to mobilize technology, to mobilize people, to procure materials and deploy them, install them. So it's a big challenge, right? Because it's a very complicated / complex kind of operation. As the projects become bigger and as they feature new characteristics, or as they feature new designs, then we will have to collaborate with more and more different works and different kinds of fields. And
Let me add to that. Because, not only construction, but we have seen in several of the industries that we have consulted, or, students that come in from those industries. There's a certain size, they do great. There's a number there, right? Like 30 people. Once they cross the 30 people threshold, and they have to rely on the second and third tier in the management, that's where the challenge comes in, right? So it's like, we see a lot of them doing great when there is a few projects or a small project, and when they personally can go there, visit there, sit down there, and make sure they're delivering great output. But as soon as they try to scale, and that's where the challenge starts, right? So I think part of this whole series is definitely we want to introduce them to the best way of thinking, doing the strategy, but also how to not lose the steering as they move faster, and like literally how to be in control.
So I've talked to some CEOs of very large quadruple A construction companies. And, at the top, when you get to that size, at the top, they'll tell you that they don't know anymore exactly what's happening inside the operations. So, the span of their ability to supervise now really relies on their ability to hire very capable lieutenants, very loyal lieutenants, and then to learn those systems, and then, to act on behalf of these owners, right? And we know that as the construction industry demand grows, we're already beginning to feel the difficulty in being able to hire enough quality people to help us expand our scope of supervision.
And not only that, we are, as an industry, competing against global demand, right? I mean, we know our Filipino engineers and project managers are in high demand in the Middle East and so many other places, not to mention some of them who are migrating to other countries. So how do you keep the talent? Or if you don't have enough talent, if you have great junior engineers, junior project managers, how do you still grow and keep everything under control, right? As you grow faster.
And the old way of doing this, the old way of supervising construction has always been very analog, manual.
What I can see is what I can manage, right?
Yeah, and then I don't know how many times you've sat in the project meeting, the site project meeting, with many of the different.
Some of them go on for like 6 to 7 hours. Yeah.
Yes. So that's really part of the challenge, right? That even the way projects have been managed, from a very analog, face-to-face, real-time, but face-to-face interface, makes it really challenging to scale, but also doesn't quite fit well within the current lifestyle of many people, right? Because we're kind of used to already this digital lifestyle. this communication using certain apps, etc. So the methods by which companies manage projects, I think for many companies who haven't yet transitioned, they're still trying to figure out like how are we going to actually reimagine how these projects can be managed.
And while the opportunities like what you talked about and the numbers we can see are great, when we looked at this survey, there were a huge amount of worries, scary numbers that showed up, right? So people are scared about what's happening to the price of raw materials as effect of the war and everything else that's happening, and so many other factors.
Yeah, and when you think about this business, you think that it's a very highly engineered business, but the reality is that there's so many uncertainties and complexities related to any given project.
Yeah, it's neat. Like I was watching a video a few days ago, and it kind of looked at all the statistic and said there is literally no way in any real large construction to predict the exact cost upfront, because there's just so many unknowns that you have to deal with. So while you want, well, neither is in our software side of the business either, but similar, and actually me coming from both side of the business, starting on the construction and then moving to the software side, and the challenges are very similar. It's like it's just a guess, how long, how much, and when will it be done, right? So that makes it difficult. Like how do you still remain profitable?
And it's a challenge because you have to really manage your relationship with the client, whether it's a developer or an agency, and that kind of need for constant updating of information and communication and talking about the risks, the price risks, the availability of supplies, etc. I mean, just being able to keep all the stakeholders on the same page and
Yeah.
understanding like what is
It's
the
like
status,
a juggling game,
what is
right?
the actual status of the project at the moment, right? Because the industry is very used to documenting everything and
In paper.
on paper. And it's difficult to really understand what's the actual number at any given time, what's the actual status of something, what's the actual availability of the site, and all these things, because not all of these actions are really communicated like in a very timely manner for all of the different decision makers, right? So every time that there's some kind of lack of coordination, then that if the data is not updated, then certain decisions will be made based on certain assumptions based on that data, and then it's gonna probably lead to some kind of mistake or waste, which really drives the cost.
Yeah, it's somewhere all connected, and certain factors have a bigger effect than others. So how do you keep those levers in control to make sure that and especially as you grow, because when it's small, you go to like 2 sites in a day, morning in one with the traffic and everything, the afternoon in another, and fine, you can see, you can check, you can make sure, but as you go to 3, 4, 5, 10, then how do you go about it?
No, and just allocating your attention, not just the attention, but allocating your materials and people to the 4 different sites is also a challenge, because you're also not receiving maybe the exact information and the exact requirement on site at any given day, right? So it's hard for these owners to really figure out whether they're doing the right thing, whether the decision that they're gonna make is actually gonna lead to a successful project, if it's gonna lead to profit for them, because it's really unclear.
And we have seen, right, like there are entrepreneurs who get started, do good up to a certain number of projects, a certain size, and then they kind of stagnate there. And some, only a few, are able to break out of that, right? So there's some kind of a ceiling, and then they kind of break out. And once they can do that, then they start scaling. Maybe there is another level after that, but before that, and as a huge number, kind of get stagnated there.
Yeah.
Yeah, they make money, but
Yeah.
just enough. It becomes a lifestyle business.
Yeah.
So how do we help our listeners? I guess is what inspired us to sit down and have this chat, isn't it?
Yeah, and then maybe just a few, the other thing here is that when we say scale, it's not like we're scaling an identical product over and over. It's not like we're creating a factory of something, right? We're trying to scale our ability to create unique once
Because
designed
every
projects.
project
It's
is different,
yeah.
isn't it? We have
So
seen this so
we're
many-
talking about scale, but we're not exactly replicating exactly the activity. So we're trying to increase the ability to create, to construct. But what we're building actually has some similarities, but there's also a lot of unique characteristics that require unique analysis, unique decision making.
So it's in one hand we are saying you need to have a structure so that you keep in control. On the other hand, we are saying that there needs to be a flexible enough structure that can catch the different kinds of projects and needs.
Yeah, and you need data to be able to understand the differences. No? You need information to know the nuance of this project versus another one. So it's really challenging. It's you need great talent. I think you need really good information so that your great talent can make great decisions. So the challenge is if you don't have great information, even if the talent is good, then it's not really an informed decision.
And how do you apply the learnings that you had in the past year, 2 year, 5 year failed project or not so profitable project, and how do you make sure you don't repeat the same mistake, right? That's most of the time the key, and that's where the data and information comes in, not just the memory, but all the other details.
Yeah, and more and more as the years go by, we really need to be concerned about other stakeholders, right? Not just our direct customer, not just our profitability, but regulation is going to be demanding that we consider other stakeholders in the system. So our decision making is going to become more complex.
Yeah, like the net zero goals, right? In how many years now? Less than 25 years. The industry is supposed to target net zero, and as a country we are a signatory to that. Now we know this is the second most polluting industry. The data says that in any city 20% of the waste, municipal waste, actually comes from construction related activities. So there's a lot of, of course there are some that would be there always, but there's a lot of waste and it's literally money down the drain. So there's definitely ways to not only protect the earth and environment and regulations, but if that can be managed better, it can end up in profitability also.
So I think there's really a desire to innovate, and I think the innovation is trying to figure out how can we be better, like how can we build better quality things, buildings, infrastructure. How can we improve the quality? Maybe make the delivery more predictable or at least more manageable. Like when can we actually complete the project? And then hopefully, of course, to do it with as less waste as possible. Hopefully protecting the margin of the contractor so that they can also reinvest some of those margins into their business, improve the tools of the trade, etc.
We keep on hearing this, that while the number of opportunities are growing, it's the contractors who are getting squeezed by all the parties. So more growth in the number of contractor adds to that, and those who can figure how to be profitable while they can predict better, because if you cannot make a good assessment, cannot make a good prediction, or cannot manage the change requests that are coming in well, you end up losing money, or you end up padding up too much and you lose the deal, and someone else who has a better system, better information, better way of managing change, they can actually go with a slimmer padding and win the deal and not necessarily lose money when there are change coming in.
There's a term for this. It's called outpacing, because in the old days, if you studied management in the old days, your choice was either be the low cost business, or the low price business, or the differentiated one with high quality. I think in today's world, it's not either or anymore. I think in today's world, you have to have like the best quality at the lowest cost. And I'm sure people will scratch their heads and say, Richard, how is that possible? If you want to have high quality, then normally you would have to have probably a bigger investment in creating it. But I think the reality is the really good construction companies that end up being the most trusted ones are the ones who can figure out how to deliver best quality on spec, best time, best cost. And for many, before in the old days, we would say quality, delivery, cost, choose two. So they will say, you want great projects fast, it's going to cost you a lot of money. You want cheap project and high quality, it's going to take a long time. So I think the challenge now is it possible for construction companies to actually aspire to be all three, right? High quality.
That's the demand to them, right?
Because
Yeah.
definitely that's what all the clients want. That's probably what the economy needs. I think the economy would be better off if we had less wastage, more predictability in some of these projects. So I think that's really the challenge now. I mean, if for the next generation contractors who really want to be well known and reliable, they want to have the support not just of their clients but of the supply chain, the material manufacturers, the equipment manufacturers, the financiers. Financiers will come in when they know that the construction company is well managed and desired by clients.
Yeah, this always the case, isn't it? I mean, literally in every industry, but this one is where I guess there's a lot of opportunity to improve how it's managed compared to others, because most other industries have kind of adapted technology, improved process, etc. The industry and I mean, I'm not saying all. Obviously, we know there are so many. We see videos of how Lego block type assembly of buildings are happening, and where someone can put up something in a month's time or less. That's still science fiction kind of YouTube video that everyone sees and says, wow, right? For most that we see every, you buy a house somewhere or you go through the road, most are still like how we saw the industry 25 years ago when we were part of it, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think when you think about the kind of construction company that we need moving forward, I think it's still wide open, right? In terms of like these entrepreneurs, especially the medium-sized construction companies, really trying to have a vision for themselves that's kind of different from how traditional construction has been done. And we need more visionaries like that.
That's interesting. There's we have been doing a research. We'll probably have it on the next session when we sit down. So what we were analyzing is the growth rate of Philippines construction companies who have moved rapidly from single A to double A to triple A and etc. and over the years, and we were just looking at the data and analyzing, and there's an interesting number of growing companies that actually emerge. So it's not only just the big names that we know that has been there for years, but there's a whole breed up, and a lot of these are like second generation, third generation kind, and these guys, like you said, they are like, they're born with technology in their hand. They are used to doing everything in their life with the mobile phone, and now all of a sudden they have been pushed to their family business, and then they see it's back to the some clipboards and all, and they start asking, like, is there a better way to do this thing, right? Those 7-hour meetings are something they would rather not do, and have more work-life balance. And that's something that we are seeing more and more among the newer, fast-growing entrepreneurs. So they want to grow, they want to be profitable, they want to grow the business, but they also don't want to sacrifice what they have in life.
Yeah, I mean, normally I would say if the old model still works for you, maybe you can try to scale it. But I think more and more what we're seeing now is that as the labor component is decreasing in the actual work plan,
Or even hard to find them.
yeah, then it really means that these entrepreneurs have to invest in capacity, in technology, in equipment, in the other factors of construction, so that they can really deliver the project. And it takes a different mindset, no? And of course, I would say the challenges in terms of like the attractiveness of engineering as a profession. Maybe in a future episode we can talk about what is the real perception young people have about taking up engineering courses. Maybe in this particular case, civil engineering or electrical or mechanical, and whether the supply can keep up with the demand. In any case, whatever the situation is, it's really imperative that all entrepreneurs really try to manage the productivity of their teams better, and they really try to invest in giving them skills and capabilities to manage these projects, because it's not going to be run the same way. I think it's going to be more focused on companies that have better capabilities, and then those who can really learn how to make a business out of it.
So, of course, we talked about technology, process, change, etc. But we also have seen that, just slapping in a technology or just slapping in some process and getting something, getting ISO on your old way of doing things, have minimal returns. So I guess one of the key things that we wanted to also share is some of the things that we have seen that works in terms of how do you form a strategy and how do you implement it. So let's move to that.
Yeah. Okay. So I think part of the observation that I've had over the years is that companies tend to manage in a way where they're not necessarily very clear about what is the relationship between what they do and the outcome. Unfortunately, I think that a lot of people are very focused on the activities, but they're not necessarily clear about what the outcome of those activities should be. So it's maybe the management is not very clear about what they should be measuring or what they should be targeting. So I think one thing that we wanted to emphasize today really was to help these entrepreneurs, these contractors, maybe have a tool that will help them see the causality of cause and effect better. So like if I do this, then hopefully we get a better result, a better desired result. And if we don't, then maybe that's the signal that we need to try other things.
Yeah, because everyone wants to be profitable, everyone wants more revenue.
Yeah.
But in reality, as you start growing, something or else starts falling apart, right? So you can, it's going back to like a Pareto principle that obviously you cannot control everything, but what are the key that needs to be looked at?
Okay. So we wanted to talk about business growth and then maybe some of the components that we can consider that should drive that. Okay. So looking at the stakeholders. So let me start with the outcomes first. Maybe we can consider, of course, we're going to consider many stakeholders, but maybe we'll consider maybe two important ones. One is the customer, whoever our customer is, a developer, an agency, and really trying to understand more deeply what are they expecting, how do they understand the project, and what are the drivers of their satisfaction based on their experience working with you. So definitely,
how do you get more business from them, right?
Well, hopefully that's the outcome, right? I mean, if they enjoy the experience of collaborating with you on projects, then hopefully they will say, these guys are going to help us reduce a lot of the headaches related to our business. So we want to forge a relationship with them even more intimately moving forward. So customer experience, I think in this industry, traditionally it's been very personal, very these relationships have been very personal. I think what might change in the future is that these relationships might remain to be personal, but they will be more data-driven moving forward. Meaning customers will want to see actual data of performance. actual results, actual measurements. They want to see the actual improvement so that there's something more tangible that they can base their perception of the experience on. So I think, that's one growth area that we will see moving forward. I'm pretty sure, like if I look at the government side of this, on the infrastructure side, given the urgency of the need for infrastructure, I'm pretty sure government will really approach some of these projects with a more open mind or a more novel approach to awarding these projects if they can see some contractors being able maybe to take some risk and to do it in a different way that might result in better results. So this might be an LGU, this might be the national government, but I think because the customers have such urgent needs that they're really hoping that they can find partners who can understand the urgency and then be partners and take risks, build operations, and build a company that's responsive really to the needs of the customer, and not just focus on like this is how we do things because this is what we can do.
And it's not only the government, right? A lot of these infra projects are also kind of subsidized or supported or from loan from multilateral organizations, and they have very rigid scorecards that they chase the government, and which ultimately goes down to the contractor.
Yeah. So, as the gap remains, or hopefully not increases, but as the gap remains in terms of like how much construction is required versus the capability to deliver, in a way, should I say it's kind of like a seller's market at this point almost, at least at that level. I think there's a lot of construction companies that are maybe a little commoditized, but for those who can claim unique capabilities in terms of specifications or delivery or complexity or size, I think maybe those are rarer and fewer.
Yeah, and as they keep delivering, or as they break out of the old ways and show the predictability, the data driven approach and all, they would be preferred by clients of whether it's private or public.
Now, of course, the other stakeholder that we really need to ensure that our strategy is aligned to is basically the financial impact. Now, and we can talk about all the sources of capital here, whether it's the equity investors, any other partner, creditors, providers of loans. Most definitely, the construction risk, the completion risk, is a fairly significant part of the kind of risk that is taken by these investors. And given the fact that, there's really a shortage of capital across, given the number of projects that we need, we really need to ensure that not only are we profitable, but the people that we're working with are profitable, maybe including the financial impact to our suppliers, to the supply chain, especially now that the supply chain is fairly more unpredictable. If you're not so profitable to work with because you don't have the flexibility to collaborate and partner with them and have a reasonable sort of deal, then it might be more difficult actually to access these materials, etc. moving forward. So, we can look at the financial impact. And, the basic point here is that construction companies need to be profitable, bottom line. And part of that profitability should probably be reinvested in the business. But they really need to have a very high level of consciousness about their ability to generate profits. Because if they're not profitable, then it's really going to be almost impossible to grow and to win the trust of the customers moving forward.
Or what's the point of growing if you lose, right?
So I would be pretty curious to see how well construction companies are able to manage a lot of the cost uncertainty and then still manage to generate a profit moving forward. So those are the two impact areas: financial impact and customer experience. Now, what we did was we tried to find a simple way to understand internally what were the things that we need to organize better, understand better, and probably make higher quality decisions around. So we can define like what is a higher quality decision. And so basically what we're talking about here really is, so what kinds of processes and systems do we have in place right now that are maybe more responsive or more reliable compared to the traditional way of managing these
Or
operations.
just reacting to things, right?
Reacting, or maybe there's a piece of information filed on a piece of paper in a folder in a filing cabinet somewhere, and it may have been tracked, but does the system allow you access to these pieces of information? Does it explain to you what is the basis of that piece of information, and does it help you make a better decision? Okay, so when we talk about better decisions, what are the key, what are the most critical decisions? Of course, all these design decisions that drive cost, all of these mobilization decisions, like how are we going to mobilize the work? What kind of methodology will we use? What kind of equipment? What kind of people?
We keep hearing this word single source of truth, because you would think that there's only one truth, but in a very complex structure where there are multiple parties, different people see it like an elephant with 7 blind men in the room, right? So that's where that information transparency
Yeah.
is something that everyone is craving for, as we spoke to a lot of them.
And it's, normally when you hear the word process and system, what comes to my mind is like people are trying to standardize things. And I think one insight I have about the construction industry is that even if you're working with the same developer, or even if you're working with the same agency, but on a different project with a different set of people in the project team, etc., and there's enough leeway for the project team to make their own decisions about how the project will be managed, and what will you discuss during the meetings, how are decisions going to be made, how are things going to be recorded, etc. So even similar projects with similar stakeholders might still have a lot of unique ways of doing things because of the nature of the people running the project. So I don't know if you can actually standardize these things across, because I'm pretty sure that a lot of those management decisions were made specifically in the context of that particular project, either the location or the type of construction or the rules that bound that area, etc. So, process and
it's
system, I think
it's a contradicting but necessary fact, right?
Yeah.
So there is need for flexibility, as well as there is a need for having a structure, because without structure you cannot compare.
yes. So from my perception, there's a thing called, you have a system, but the design is universal. It's a plug and play universal kind of system. Whereas you have a system that maybe has like a universal skeleton, but then it really allows you to, come up with certain decisions about how to design the process that's responsive to the context of that project. So that's hard, right? I mean, that's hard to
Yeah.
develop the expertise to make those
And
decisions.
a lot of time that's why some companies before just stuck to paper, saying that we can easily print something else out and change who sees what and all, but that's not scalable.
Yeah.
And we have seen the result in terms of predictability and profitability and the waste.
So, there's really a need to not just change the processes and the systems, but to translate and leverage those processes into systems to actual improvements in performance. So I think, the fourth component that we're talking about is really striving for actual tangible performance improvement, and being very clear about the metrics, and hopefully leveraging different strategies that we have in terms of like what kind of process we can build based on top of what system. And this is challenging. The internal performance is challenging because we know that we do work in a multi kind of stakeholder environment on site. So not everything is within our control. So we need to be very clear also in terms of like what part of the work is actually the result of our excellent work, or which part of the outcome is really a reflection of our improvement of
I
our
just got
innovation,
lucky.
or did we just get lucky, right? Or maybe but kind of it depends on how you look at luck, right? I mean, if you were at the right
True.
place at the right time, maybe having the information makes you luckier too. Okay, so these are the components that we talked about. I'm sure you can find other resources that will go deeper into the details, but I think for construction companies that are medium size and at the cusp of growing, we wanted to have something that was relevant but at the same time simple enough to adopt within the organization. So we started with this, and I think the way to look at it is that there's some causal model here. Okay, so if we truly value customer experience and financial impact, then our focus should really be on improving internal performance. So in the construction industry, maybe one way to talk about internal performance is like the design, the quality of the construction, the timeliness of the delivery, the cost. Okay, so like how well are we doing there,
Yeah.
and how that performance really is developed compared to past performance because of new processes or new systems that
Like
we've leveraged.
mistakes, right? One thing, or rework that you call, sometime there's a questionable thing in the design, and then you try to get a clarification on it. You raise RFI, and maybe the engineer or the architect is on vacation, and since you are under time pressure, sometimes you go ahead and do whatever you best understand out of it, except after they come back and check it, and then it ends up you demolish and redo the work, and that's such a waste, right? You for labor work, for everything. And yeah, it sounds like a no-brainer, but it keeps happening so often.
Well, because sometimes the decision to move forward has to happen.
Yeah.
People take a risk, but it would be nice if they could find a way to reduce the risk of making a mistake. Okay, I think here the other thing is that as we think about the people on site, how well can they really make certain decisions based on how well they know the customer? How well do they really understand the trade-off that the customer is willing to take at that particular moment in time? At that moment in time, is the customer all in on fast delivery? Or do they see some slack in the schedule and they're kind of all in on saving some money because the timeline can handle some of that slack? So, as the project evolves, different priorities evolve. And, this is what I mean by internal performance, right? The team on the ground can make the right decision based on how they understand what the customer needs at any given moment.
And the boardroom perhaps need to have easy visibility across project.
Yeah.
Certain metrics that they can say, and they can identify something before it goes wrong.
Yeah.
And do something about it, right?
Because you can't just have one rule, right? It can't always be we're always trying to save cost all the time.
Right.
Because I don't think the client thinks that way either, right? The client knows that in many cases, there's an opportunity cost if we're just saving on cost, but we're not prioritizing delivery, etc. So,
or even if there is a cost, and it's a justifiable cost, how do you pass it up to the client, right? Because if you can justify it, they would be ready to pay.
So, being able to explain these decisions on site or on the ground, and making sure that everybody's on the same page, from the client all the way back into the supply chain, that's a very kind of important skill for the contractors, because ultimately, if there's some misalignment, right, between the client or the suppliers or the people, then that gap is going to be felt on site, and the cost of that gap occurring is going to be felt and remembered, and it may not end up being a very pleasant memory for the customers. So we're presenting this model, and to help you kind of understand how it moves into growth in the future.
So it's not one time, right?
It's not one time. they're actually related. And the more you're able to choose the right process and the right system, and the more you're able to leverage it into real impact, real improvements in performance indicators internally.
And bite-sized tests, perhaps, right? Because one of the things that we have seen is, if there's a new system, new process, there's always resistance to change. So it's always better to choose something, create a quick win, and then let everyone else look for the next thing to improve on, rather than you try to implement too many things, and everyone kind of raises their hand and say, hey, we're running a business here, we are running with a deadline or something, and everything stops.
And it's for me, the learning aspect to what you just said, no? How do we ensure that the organization is learning how to be better? Because I also know that sometimes when a project begins or a project ends, it seems like some of the experiences in the past aren't necessarily leveraged into some of the next projects, right? So personally, I'm very particular about understanding how these organizations learn, because the insight, the feedback should be coming from the processes and the systems. So if you can really improve the performance, then it will have a big impact on the customer's willingness to re-engage. And this willingness to re-engage will, of course, have a positive impact both on the amount of return that you will earn, but also on the riskiness of your business. Meaning, creditors, for example, will view you as less risky if they know that you have a deep, intimate relationship with some of your clients, and this generates a backlog of projects that you can rely on moving forward. That can be the basis of some kind of financial accommodation by the creditors. So as the financial impact increases, then the question is, so how much can we reinvest in improving the business further? How much can we reinvest in the tools, in the capabilities? And this is a risk-taking perspective, right? To not reinvest and to just sort of
take a risk.
not take a risk in developing new ways of doing things, and just keep on relying on the same process and charging that to the project, but not necessarily investing in your organization to improve the capability of the tools, the technology, or the people. I think that's kind of going to differentiate contractors moving forward, right? The ones that are willing to reinvest in this ever-changing context of construction, labor, environment, usage, etc. There's really a need to figure out what are the appropriate investments. So we really need to go back and understand which investments in which system is going to have the biggest impact on my internal performance. So we need to look at all of these things as connected, and we will try to invest more money in those points that have the highest leverage, the highest ROI for the company.
So maybe at this point we can kind of look at a sample or example, so that at least we make it more tangible.
Yeah. Okay.
This podcast was recorded during a live session of the Unstoppable Growth Learning Series. It is also available in audio-only format on Spotify. Brought to you by Connected Construction, an online resource for digital construction management, and Steer, a construction management software. Visit www.steerplatform.com/unstoppable-growth or scan the QR code to register for the live session.